In October 1940, the Atlantic was a graveyard of steel. The Battle of the Atlantic had entered its bloodiest phase, and the British merchant convoys, lifelines carrying food, fuel, and munitions, were under relentless attack. Among them was Convoy SC-7, a slow-moving fleet of 35 merchant ships, departing from Sydney, Nova Scotia, bound for Liverpool. Each vessel carried precious cargo, but their real burden was the hope of a nation cut off from the world by the U-boats lurking beneath the waves. The convoy set sail on October 5th, escorted at first by the aging sloop HMS Scarborough. The Admiralty knew these escorts were inadequate. Too few ships, too little radar coverage, and no air patrols once beyond the reach of coastal command. Yet there was no choice. Britain's ports were desperate, and every day lost meant another ration cut, another blacked-out city running short of fuel. For a week, the North Atlantic was calm, a deceptive peace under grey skies. But as night fell on October 16th, a shadow passed beneath the surface. A German Type 7 submarine commanded by Kapitänleutnant Günther Prien, the same man who had famously sunk the Royal Oak inside Scapa Flow a year before. Prien's U-47 was part of a growing formation of U-boats, a wolf pack, gathering by radio direction finding signals, guided by the Befehlshaber der Unterseeboote, BDU command in Lorient, France. By midnight, the wolves had found their prey. What followed became one of the first fully coordinated U-boat assaults in history. Under the cover of darkness, 7 submarines, U-48, U-46, U-99 and others, crept into the convoy lanes. They struck in synchronized waves, firing spreads of torpedoes at silhouettes faintly visible against the moonlit horizon. Merchant ships erupted into fireballs. Oil tankers burned like floating furnaces. The sea itself glowed orange with flame. The freighter, Empire Brigade, sent one desperate SOS before vanishing. Under attack! Torpedoes portside. Position unknown. Then silence. Within hours, 20 ships were gone. Some vanished without distress signals. Others broke apart in seconds. Survivors, clinging to debris, later reported seeing torpedo tracks coming from impossible angles, as if there were more submarines than officially recorded. A few even swore they heard false convoy signals, ghost voices over the wireless urging ships to turn starboard, directions that led straight into danger. Historians still debate what those voices were. Some attribute them to German decoy transmissions, part of the Funkspiel radio deception tactics then being tested. Others believe the chaos and atmospheric interference of night fighting created auditory illusions. Whatever the cause, the result was the same: confusion, panic, and catastrophic loss. By dawn, only 15 ships remained afloat. HMS Scarborough struggled to mount a defense, her depth charges exploding blindly into the cold depths. Captain H.A.P. Coles later wrote in his logbook, "We could see nothing. The ocean was burning. Men screaming in the water. The convoy, gone." In London, Admiralty intelligence officers pored over intercepts from Bletchley Park. They knew German code-breaking was a factor, but at this stage of the war, the Enigma machine's naval cipher remained unbroken. How had Dönitz's U-boats known the convoy's exact route and timing? Was there a leak, or was it luck born of ruthless efficiency? The mystery deepened when post-war records revealed that not all the wrecks were ever found. Sonar expeditions in the 1970s located scattered remains across an unusually wide area, some nearly 100 miles from the convoy's last reported position. This dispersion made no sense given the convoy's formation and course. It was as if ships had broken away or been lured off in separate directions before being sunk. Convoy SC-7 marked the dawn of a new kind of warfare, one waged by unseen hunters in a theatre of fog and static. For Britain, it was a devastating lesson. The Admiralty immediately ordered changes: more escorts, tighter formations, and the introduction of the Type 271 radar. But for many sailors' families, no closure ever came. The sea had swallowed them whole, along with the answers. Today, the sinking of Convoy SC-7 remains one of the most mysterious naval tragedies of World War II, not because of how it happened, but because of what we still don't know. Were German U-boats acting alone, or was there an intelligence breach? Did the convoy's escorts fall victim to radio deception? The North Atlantic still guards its silence, and as the war dragged on, Britain would face even darker nights and even greater mysteries. in the cold waters that lay between hope and home. The next convoy, HX-79, would follow only days later and meet the same deadly fate. Just 3 days after the devastation of Convoy SC-7, another British convoy, HX-79, left Halifax, Nova Scotia, bound for Liverpool. It was October 19, 1940. The Atlantic was growing colder, and the merchant sailors knew the dangers ahead, but none could have foreseen what was about to happen. A coordinated slaughter that would echo through Admiralty corridors for years to come. Convoy HX-79 was faster and better protected than SC-7. It consisted of 49 ships carrying vital supplies, food, steel, oil, and military equipment. Escorting them were several warships including HMS Convoy, HMS Bluebell, and the destroyer HMS Brooke. Their commanders were experienced, their morale high, but the U-boats, emboldened by recent success, were already hunting. At BDU headquarters in Lorient, Admiral Karl Dönitz studied intercepted British transmissions and plotted the convoy's projected route. His Wolfpack tactic, rudely, was beginning to mature into a deadly science. Among those now closing in were U-47 under Prien, U-46 under Endras, and U-99 under the young and ruthless Otto Kretschmer. The three were legends among U-boat crews, silent predators whose combined kills already numbered in the hundreds of thousands of tons. That night, under cloud and mist, the U-boats struck again. At 22:01 hours, U-47 slipped between the outer escorts, using the darkness and surface waves to mask its approach. Within minutes, torpedoes streaked toward the heart of HX-79. The merchant ship SS Whitford Point was the first to explode, her decks torn apart by a direct hit. Flames illuminated the convoy's columns, turning the sea into a stage of fire. The illumination worked in the U-boat's favor, revealing targets against the glowing backdrop. HMS Convoy immediately dropped depth charges, but they fell on empty water. Kretschmer, lurking in U-99, exploited the chaos. In just 90 minutes, he sank 5 ships, including SS Loch Lomond and SS Baron Kinnaird, with surgical precision. His crew operated in eerie silence, torpedoes reloaded by touch alone. Like ghosts on the water, one survivor later recalled. You never saw them, never heard them, just the explosion, then the sea. The British escorts fought desperately, but their sonar, primitive ASDIC systems, struggled in rough seas. Every ping returned echoes, false contacts, and misleading bearings. The U-boats were always one step ahead. By dawn, 14 ships lay beneath the Atlantic. Survivors described hearing phantom orders over their radios. Turn 2 degrees north, convoy regroup. But those commands had not come from the escorts. The Admiralty later confirmed the frequencies used were correct. Yet no such transmissions were ever authorized. Was the German Navy spoofing British signals? Evidence suggests they were experimenting with radio deception, using captured call signs and frequency interference to confuse escorts. A top-secret Admiralty report dated November 1940, declassified decades later, refers cryptically to enemy impersonation of command signals. The technology of the time made such mimicry possible but unreliable, and yet the pattern matched survivor accounts precisely. After the war, when British codebreakers at Bletchley Park gained access to captured German records, they found something unsettling. Among BDU's war diaries for that week were references to British convoy cooperation greater than expected. Historians have long debated whether this was irony, a mistranslation, or a subtle hint that some British signals had indeed been compromised. The psychological toll on Allied sailors was immense. Merchant mariner John L. Merriweather, one of the few survivors from SS Assyrian, wrote in his 1946 memoir, "We obeyed orders that never came. The voices sounded British, clear as any I'd heard. They told us to turn. We turned. Straight into hell." His testimony remains one of the most chilling first-hand accounts from the Atlantic campaign. The loss of HX-79, following so soon after SC-7, sent shockwaves through the Admiralty. The official inquiry concluded that both convoys had been overwhelmed by superior coordination, but privately, questions mounted. Was the Kriegsmarine receiving inside information? Could the U-boats somehow be triangulating convoy positions through unencrypted merchant chatter? Or was there something deeper, an unknown breach in British communication security? Winston Churchill, then First Lord of the Admiralty, was reportedly furious. He ordered an immediate increase in convoy escort strength and the rapid deployment of additional corvettes from the Flower-class series. Yet production delays and losses meant that months would pass before those reinforcements arrived. For now, the Atlantic remained a killing ground. When the storm cleared, the wreckage of HX-79 drifted for miles, oil slicks marking the ocean's surface. Some lifeboats were found days later, empty, their compasses smashed, their oars adrift. No one ever determined whether they were destroyed by the elements or by something else. What is certain is that the records from those final radio transmissions contain anomalies, ghost signals logged on multiple frequencies at once, something British technicians at the time could not explain. Convoy HX-79 became a case study in failure and fear, an example of how invisible warfare could devastate even the best prepared forces. For the U-boats, it was another triumph. For the Allies, a warning that the Atlantic had become not just a battlefield, but a maze of misinformation. And as 1941 dawned, the mystery of these disappearances deepened. Far to the north, in the icy waters of the Arctic, a new convoy would soon face a fate even more harrowing, one that would remain one of the most controversial episodes in naval history, the destruction of convoy PQ-17. By mid-1942, the Arctic convoys had become Britain's most dangerous lifeline, an icebound highway to the Soviet Union, delivering tanks, aircraft, and supplies essential for the Eastern Front. Among them, convoy PQ-17 stands as a chilling example of courage, tragedy, and enduring mystery. It sailed from Hvalfjörður, Iceland, on June 27, 1942, carrying 35 merchant ships under the escort of powerful Royal Navy warships. The destination, Arkhangelsk. The danger, the icy Barents Sea, and the shadow of the German battleship, Tirpitz. The men aboard PQ-17 knew what awaited them. U-boats prowled the depths, Luftwaffe bombers roamed from occupied Norway, and icebergs drifted silently in the fog. But it wasn't just the elements or the enemy that would destroy them. It was a single order, a decision made thousands of miles away, that sealed their fate. At first, the convoy moved steadily eastward. The heavy cruiser HMS London, the destroyer HMS Keppel, and a screen of smaller escorts kept formation. Morale was high. One signalman, Petty Officer Thomas Leary, wrote in his diary, "The sea is calm, the sky silver. Strange to think such beauty hides death beneath it." For several days, German reconnaissance aircraft shadowed them, reporting positions back to Admiral Dönitz and to the feared Tirpitz, anchored in Altenfjord. Then, on July 4th, everything changed. A series of intercepted Enigma decrypts, later proven inaccurate, suggested that the Tirpitz, accompanied by heavy cruisers Admiral Hipper and Lutzow, had left port and was heading to intercept PQ-17. To the Admiralty in London, this was an existential threat. A battleship attack could annihilate the convoy in minutes. In panic, First Sea Lord Dudley Pound issued one of the most controversial orders in naval history. Convoy is to scatter. It was a death sentence. The escorts, including the cruisers HMS London and Norfolk, were ordered to withdraw west to intercept the Tirpitz, leaving the merchant ships alone in hostile waters. Captain John Dowding of the freighter Troubadour reportedly protested the order over wireless. "We are defenseless, cannot proceed independently through pack ice." His message received no reply. Within hours, chaos consumed PQ-17. Spread across hundreds of miles, the once organized fleet became isolated targets. U-boats surfaced one by one. German aircraft from Luftflotte 5 attacked in waves, their bombs turning the Arctic sky into fire. Ships vanished into the mist, struck by torpedoes and aerial bombs, their crews freezing in seconds when they hit the water. By the morning of July 10th, 24 of the 35 ships were gone. And yet, the Tirpitz never arrived. She had never even left Altenfjord. The deception had worked, but it was Britain's own misjudgment that doomed the convoy. Post-war records revealed that German radio traffic suggesting a sortie had been exaggerated by Allied intelligence. The Tirpitz's supposed movement was a phantom, an illusion that caused the Admiralty to destroy its own fleet's protection. Still, the mystery of PQ-17 goes deeper than one tragic decision. Several of the sunken ships have never been located, despite decades of sonar mapping. Their wrecks are missing, presumed buried under sediment or carried away by shifting ice. More curiously, survivors reported strange navigation failures during the breakout. Compasses spun aimlessly. Radio signals faded without interference. One escort commander later noted in his report, magnetic deviation beyond normal limits. Believed cause unknown. Some modern researchers suggest the high-latitude magnetic fields, or German radar jamming devices known as Kettenhund, may have caused these anomalies. But others point to the sheer chaos and emotional trauma of the scatter order. The confusion of ships navigating blindly through ice and fog, alone, hunted, and terrified. The human toll was immense. In a haunting letter found in the personal effects of able seaman Eric Talbot, lost aboard the Hartlebury, he wrote, "We've seen lights in the fog, not ours, ships where there should be none. God knows who they are." His body was never found. When the survivors finally limped into Arkhangelsk weeks later, frostbitten and broken, the Arctic convoy's myth of invincibility had shattered. Only 11 of PQ-17's original 35 ships reached port. Winston Churchill called it one of the most melancholy naval episodes of the war. Admiral Pound never recovered from the shame of his decision. He died a year later, his health and spirit destroyed. To this day, the Barents Sea guards the secrets of PQ-17. The official Admiralty archives offer explanations: poor intelligence, harsh weather, German coordination. Yet divers and researchers still question why some wrecks are missing, why so many distress calls ended mid-transmission, and how multiple ships seem to vanish without trace between confirmed sightings. In the end, the PQ-17 disaster became both a warning and a symbol of human error, technological limits, and the relentless uncertainty of naval warfare. But it also opened new questions about the invisible war of information, about deception, miscommunication, and the price of fear. And as 1942 drew to a close, the Atlantic warfront shifted again. From the frozen Arctic to the stormy mid-ocean, another convoy, ON 154, would soon face the same darkness, and once again, the sea would swallow more than ships. It would take the truth itself. December 1942. The Atlantic roared with winter storms, a freezing, hostile expanse where wind, wave, and war blended into one endless ordeal. Convoy ON 154, a westbound fleet of merchant vessels bound for New York, left Liverpool on December 18th. 39 ships, escorted by a small, weary flotilla of 5 Canadian corvettes and a single destroyer, HMS Burwell. The men aboard had one goal: to bring supplies and men to the United States and return with the goods that kept Britain alive. None could know they were sailing straight into one of the most perplexing and disastrous convoy battles of the war. From the beginning, ON 154 faced both the enemy and nature itself. Gale-force winds battered the ships, scattering them across the ocean and breaking radio silence as captains fought to maintain contact. Ice-coated decks. Men lost fingers to frostbite as they wrestled with frozen hawsers. The corvettes, Battleford, Napanee, Shediac, Chilliwack, and Ville de Quebec, strained to hold formation. Lieutenant Commander Guy Windire, aboard Ville de Quebec, wrote in his log, "Sea rising, ships invisible in snow squalls, convoy cohesion uncertain, wireless interference worsening." That interference, static, sudden bursts of distorted noise, would soon take on a darker meaning. On December 26th, German U-boats of the Gruppe Spitz, Wolfpack, picked up the convoy's scent. U-356, commanded by Kapitänleutnant Günther Ruppelt, was first to sight them, relaying the position to U-225, U-260, and U-406. Within hours, Donitz's headquarters in Lorient had coordinated a pincer attack. But the weather turned the battlefield into chaos. Snow obscured periscopes. Depth charges detonated blindly in the void. Still, the submarine struck. The freighter, Empire Shackleton, was hit just after midnight, breaking apart in seconds. HMS Burwell raced to rescue survivors, but picked up nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, just an oil slick vanishing into the storm. Over the next 2 nights, 7 more ships went down. What troubled investigators later wasn't just the scale of loss, but the irregularity of it. Some vessels seemed to disappear without distress calls or radar signatures. Others transmitted garbled messages that suggested misidentification, ships firing on each other in confusion. The Scottish Heather, reportedly sent a transmission reading only. Convoy lights, wrong side, don't recognize pattern. Moments later, her signal cut out. Historians now believe the Germans were using new tactics. Surface shadowing at night, combined with decoy light signals to mimic escort patterns. Some survivors swore they saw British destroyers flashing recognition lamps that led them into ambush. It's possible U-boats use captured signal codes, though no documentation of such an operation survives. The idea of false convoy lights remains one of ON 154's strangest mysteries. By December 28th, U-boat attacks had become relentless. HMS Burwell dropped her last depth charges and withdrew, low on fuel. The corvettes fought alone, forming small protective clusters around surviving ships. Lieutenant Windeyer later recalled, "Our ASDIC was useless, the water too rough, the echoes too many. We fired where the sea looked wrong. The sense of isolation grew. At least 4 ships vanished completely from records between December 29th and January 1st. No wrecks were found in post-war surveys. The U-boat logs claim kills, but the reported coordinates don't match the known convoy route." In early January, the battered remains of ON 154 limped toward Halifax. Only half the convoy survived. The official Admiralty report lists 14 confirmed sinkings, but the number doesn't include those untraceable. Ships last sighted and never heard from again. Even more curious were the communications anomalies. Naval historians studying decrypted signals decades later discovered overlapping frequencies from ON 154's distress band, as if 2 identical transmissions had been broadcast simultaneously from different sources. One theory suggests atmospheric reflection, a phenomenon known as skip interference. But to the men who survived, it felt like something more deliberate, as though someone, or something, had been mirroring their calls. "It was like hearing your own voice echoed back," one radio operator said years later. Same message, different direction, then silence. For the Royal Navy, the ON 154 disaster was another reminder of the limits of convoy protection. The Canadian corvettes had fought bravely, but they were outgunned, under-equipped, and exhausted. In the aftermath, the Admiralty upgraded escort groups with long-range destroyers and improved radar sets. Yet questions lingered, not just about tactics, but about the inexplicable elements, the false lights, the lost transmissions, the ships that simply never arrived. When post-war researchers revisited the case in the 1970s using sonar mapping, they found wrecks scattered over a wide area of the mid-Atlantic, far broader than any known convoy breakup should produce. It suggested ships had been separated earlier than believed, perhaps diverted by false coordinates or misread signals. The ocean floor offered no answers, only fragmented hulls and scattered debris, far from where they should have lain. Convoy. ON 154 faded into history as another statistic of the U-boat war. 14 ships lost, 400 men dead. Yet for naval historians, it represents something more, a turning point in the invisible war of signals and deception, where human error, nature, and cunning enemy tactics combine to create mysteries that endure to this day. And as 1943 dawned, the tide of war began to turn. The Allies were learning, adapting, and striking back. But even victory would not end the riddles of the sea. Far to the frozen north, another convoy, WWII, would face an enemy attack that defied explanation and would alter the course of the naval war forever. In the frozen waters of the Barents Sea, December 1942 gave way to 1943 under skies heavy with storm and silence. Convoy WWII, the last Arctic convoy of that bitter year, set sail from Loch Ewe, Scotland. On December 22nd, it carried supplies for the Soviet Union, tanks, ammunition, aircraft parts, 20 merchant vessels under the protection of HMS Onslow, and a small force of destroyers and minesweepers. The men knew what had happened to PQ-17 just 6 months earlier. They swore it would not happen again, yet even before the first enemy sighting, something strange began to unfold. As the convoy passed north of Norway, wireless operators reported receiving faint, ghostly Morse signals on the same frequency used by the Royal Navy's command net. At first they were dismissed as atmospheric interference, common in the polar latitudes, but then came a message that stopped one operator cold. Convoy sighted, proceeding east, enemy closing. The problem: the signal bore a genuine British call sign, one that belonged to a destroyer still within the convoy, formation. The tension only deepened as the convoy entered the stormy Arctic on December 30th. Visibility dropped to less than a mile. Winds howled through the rigging, sleet freezing instantly on metal. HMS Obdurate lost radar contact with two merchantmen, Alithia and Brambleleaf, which vanished into the mist. Hours later, they reappeared off the convoy's flank, moving erratically. Their signal lamps flashed an identification code that didn't match the day's list. Commander Robert Sherbrooke aboard HMS Onslow noted in his log, "Possible enemy mimicry. Vessels appear uncertain, of course." Before confirmation could be made, snow closed in again. When visibility cleared, both ships were gone. On December 31st, 1942, New Year's Eve, the Germans struck. Admiral Oskar Kummitz led the Admiral Hipper, Lutzow, and 6 destroyers in a surface assault designed to annihilate the convoy. But the Royal Navy escorts, outgunned yet determined, fought back with ferocity. The ensuing clash became known as the Battle of the Barents Sea, a rare instance where smaller British ships successfully repelled a superior German force. HMS Onslow took severe damage, and Commander Sherbrooke was wounded by shell fragments, yet he refused to abandon command. His bravery later earned him the Victoria Cross. By noon, the German cruisers withdrew, believing the convoy's escorts were far stronger than they actually were. On paper, it was a clear British victory. But when the ice settled and the losses were counted, several merchant ships were unaccounted for. They had not been hit by German shells or torpedoes. They had simply vanished during the engagement. Post-battle reports noted discrepancies in radar logs. Some ships appeared twice in the same sweep. Others appeared and disappeared between pings. One sonar operator aboard HMS Orwell swore he had detected a fast-moving contact, unlike any submarine known, heading away from the convoy moments before Alithia's final transmission. His report was marked unsubstantiated and buried in post-action archives for decades. After the war, intelligence officers reviewing declassified Enigma decrypts found cryptic mentions of a German vessel, codename Eismeerjäger, Ice Sea Hunter, that operated independently north of the convoy's route. Its existence has never been confirmed. Some believe it was a disguised U-boat used for reconnaissance. Others think it was a mistranslation for Luftwaffe patrols operating out of Kirkenes. Yet whatever the truth, the coincidence between this silent hunter and the ships that disappeared from JW51B remains unsettling. What makes JW51B remarkable is not just the battle itself, but what followed. The victory embarrassed Hitler, who was furious that 2 German heavy cruisers had failed to sink a single merchantman. In his rage, he ordered the virtual dismantling of the German surface fleet, transferring resources to the U-boat arm instead. Strategically, it was a turning point, but for the families of those missing ships, it brought no comfort. The sea still refused to give them back. In later decades, Arctic researchers used sonar to locate the wrecks of JW51B's known losses. Most were found clustered near the convoy's official route, but not all. A handful of wrecks, including one believed to be Brambleleaf, lay far to the north, outside the recorded battle zone, their hulls torn open in patterns inconsistent with torpedo impacts. The cause remains unknown. Some suggest drifting ice, others undetected mines, but no definitive answer has ever been proven. Commander Sherbrooke, reflecting years later, said in an interview, "You can win a battle and still lose men to the sea's own mysteries. There are things out there beyond radar, beyond record." His words captured the enduring unease that surrounded the Arctic convoys, that in these lonely, frozen seas even victory could feel haunted. For historians, JW51B stands as both triumph and enigma. It was a tactical success that saved the Arctic route and inspired Churchill's praise. Yet beneath the headlines lay unanswered questions about false signals, phantom contacts, and ships erased without trace. Whether the result of German deception, navigation failure, or the unrelenting brutality of the elements, the truth remains adrift somewhere in the Arctic depths. And as 1943 gave way to 1944, the Allies finally began to turn the tide. Yet for naval investigators, one question endured. Why did so many British convoys vanish without complete explanation? As the war ended, teams scoured declassified archives, sonar records, and survivor testimonies, hoping to piece together a final account of these disappearances. What they found only deepened the mystery. The guns of World War II finally fell silent in 1945, but the Atlantic did not rest. Beneath its grey surface lay thousands of wrecks, steel tombs scattered across the seabed from Iceland to Gibraltar. For Britain, the convoys were more than logistics. They were the lifeblood of survival. Yet among the thousands of voyages that crossed those perilous waters, 5 stood apart. Convoys whose losses defied logic, whose wrecks defied discovery, and whose stories still murmur through the static of naval archives. In the post-war years, investigators sought to bring closure to the families of those lost at sea. The Admiralty opened new research divisions, sifting through decoded enigma logs, escort diaries, and radio transmissions. Some answers emerged. Others only spawned deeper questions. Commander Peter Kemp, one of the Royal Navy's intelligence officers reassigned to the Admiralty Historical Section, wrote in 1947, "The pattern of convoy loss is consistent in its inconsistency. Certain fleets suffer abnormal disappearance beyond enemy documentation. It is as if the Atlantic itself conspired with the foe." The convoys SC-7, HX-79, PQ-17, ON-154, and JW-51B all shared troubling similarities. Each suffered communication breakdowns or false transmissions. Each lost ships whose wrecks were later found far from recorded positions. And each involved unusual radio or navigation phenomena that could not be fully explained by the technology of the era. To wartime commanders, they were tragedies. To post-war analysts, they were puzzles, the beginnings of what one historian later called the unsolved chapter of the Atlantic War. In the late 1950s, the British Submarine Detection Branch undertook Operation Echo Survey, using newly developed sonar and magnetometer equipment to map the ocean floor along known convoy routes. The survey teams recovered signals from dozens of wrecks, tankers, freighters, and escorts, but several key ships listed in wartime records were simply absent. Among them, Empire Brigade from SC-7, Assyrian from HX-79, and Brambleleaf from JW-51B. Despite detailed positional logs, no trace was found. One sonar operator noted, "Metallic readings appear, then vanish, as though the sea swallowed the echoes." The Admiralty's public position remained cautious. Navigational error, misreported coordinates, and environmental drift could easily account for such anomalies. Yet in private correspondence, certain officers remained unconvinced. A declassified memorandum from 1961, authored by Vice Admiral Sir William Tennant, reads, "The pattern of losses suggests external manipulation of communications, possibly via compromised frequencies, evidence insufficient for publication." What exactly external manipulation meant was never clarified. Meanwhile, veterans of the convoys carried their memories and their doubts. In oral histories recorded in the 1970s, several survivors recalled strange events still etched in their minds: compasses reversing direction, phantom lights on the horizon, or hearing their own call signs repeated back through the static. Ordinary men, engineers, stewards, signalers, who had no reason to invent the uncanny. "You could tell when the enemy was there," said one survivor of HX-79. "The sea felt alive, but sometimes you couldn't tell if it was them or something else we couldn't name." The scientific community has since provided rational explanations. Aurora activity can disrupt radio waves. Magnetic storms at high latitudes can throw compasses off course. Atmospheric ducting can reflect signals across hundreds of miles. Each fact chips away at the myths, grounding them in physics, not ghosts. And yet, even armed with science, mystery remains. Because mystery in war is not always supernatural. It is often human. It is the product of confusion, fear, and the impossible conditions that men were asked to survive. The unrecorded dead of the Atlantic now number over 30,000. For many, no grave exists but the deep. The records list their ships as missing due to enemy action, a phrase that conceals uncertainty behind bureaucratic simplicity. But in the corridors of the Imperial War Museum, on aging charts and faded logbooks, red ink still circles certain names: Empire Brigade, Elithia, Brambleleaf, Scottish Heather, ships that vanished from history's line of sight. In 2003, a multinational research project led by the Royal Navy and WWII attempted to retrace the route of PQ-17 using modern sonar mapping. Several wrecks were found, confirming German kill records. But others, including Hartlebury and River Afton, remain undiscovered. Even with 21st century equipment, the Arctic refused to yield all its secrets. "We are chasing ghosts made of salt and steel," said one diver. "Every wreck we find just leads to another question." So the story of these convoys, 5 among thousands, endures not as folklore, but as a cautionary tale. A reminder that even the most advanced machines of war could be undone by uncertainty, by miscommunication, and by the ocean's indifference. The mysteries of their disappearance reveal the limits of human control, and the cost of fighting a war where the enemy was not only the U-boat, but the sea itself. The files are closed now. The sea is quiet, but somewhere in the darkness below, the remains of those ships still lie. Silent witnesses to a war that ended 80 years ago, and to questions that still have no answers. The North Atlantic keeps its secrets well,